Hello and welcome to the European Report. My name is Simon Barrett. I'm the presenter and the producer of this program. I recently asked my very good friend Benjamin Rubin, who is a practicing Jew and an Israeli, to take my place to interview a very famous Israeli journalist in the press club in Brussels, A0017803001. Special thanks for this program must go to the European Coalition for Israel, who sponsor the European Report, and also special thanks must go to the European Israel Press Association, who financed the entire filming of this project. So sit back and enjoy this very special interview from Brussels.
Hello and welcome to a special program of the European Report here from the heart of Europe, the press club in Brussels. My name is Benjamin Rubin and I will be standing in for Simon Barrett today, who unfortunately couldn't be with us. Some of you may know me already from the Middle East Report, where I'm a usual guest, but today I'm taking a different role. I will be interviewing an honorable guest and a fascinating interview, Mr. Bedror Yemini, who is a prominent Israeli journalist, a researcher, and a jurist. I'd like to thank our host today, which is the European Israeli Press Association. Especially, I'd like to thank Paul Tillens for organizing this interview. And I'm excited, especially about this interview, because I've been following Mr. Yemini's column in the Israeli papers for the last 5 years. And I have to say honestly that Mr. Yemini brings an opinion and a voice and a way of articulating his opinion that puts him in the top of the Israeli spokespeople and a personal hero for myself. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation and being with us today.
Thank you for hosting me.
We're going to talk today about concept that you're using a lot, industry of lie and other activities you're doing. But before we go into the depth of the matter, I wanted to ask you a question a little bit about your background. We just heard you speak in a press conference organized by APA, and you said that your parents were Palestinians, Palestinian Jews. That is interesting.
Yes, of course, because people don't know, but Palestine is a very old Roman name, nothing to do not with Jews, not with Arabs. It was used mainly by Christians, and whoever lived under the British mandate was Palestinian, and so that my parents actually had an ID of Palestinians because they were under the British mandate. And people don't understand it because many times people think that Palestine is a kind of an Arab name or of an Arab nationality. Nothing to do with it. People have to know history. After the First World War, Palestine was declared by the British mandate by the British occupation of the area that was never before during the Ottoman Empire was called Palestine. It was called Palestine by the Romans 1,000 years ago, but not in our generations. So my parents were Palestinians.
So we have kind of a mixed terms that got lost in translation,
yes,
if you may.
Exactly.
Also, following your history, you have quite an interesting history. You studied law, if I'm not mistaken?
I studied law, I studied humanities, yes, both.
And you declared yourself as that you were a peace activist, or you are a peace activist?
For many years, I was part of the peace camp. Something like more than 20 years ago, I went all the way to Tunisia to meet Yasser Arafat, who was the leader of the Palestinian movement, PLO, Palestinian Liberation Movement, in order to speak, in order to promote peace in my capacity only as someone who is a peace activist in that time.
So what happened, Mr. Yemini? Did the peace change or did you change?
One of the problems of many intellectuals is that they are not confused by facts, and things happen. I'm a peace supporter, I'm pro-Palestinian, I'm pro-Israeli, I'm pro-peace. I did not change my mind, but things happened. And we have to face the reality. Unfortunately, too many people are ignoring the reality. People like to live in denial. And a lot of things happened since more than 20 years ago up to now. We had the Oslo process.
You mean the Oslo peace process that started
Exactly.
in 1994?
And agreements were signed by Israel and the Palestinians. Later on, to remind us all, there was the Clinton proposal, a peace initiative by the President of the United States. 2 states for 2 peoples. It was rejected by the Palestinians. We have to remember it. Again, it happened in 2008. A peace proposal, 2 states for 2 peoples, by Ehud Olmert. It was rejected again by the leader of the Palestinians, Abu Mazen. We cannot forget it. We cannot forget it. And people sometimes, I have no idea why, but they tend to forget it. Actually, I guess that we are going to speak about the reasons why people ignore facts, why people speak about narratives, which mean many times lies, instead of to speak about reality and about the real facts, real history.
I think your speciality and what makes you unique in your writing and your talking is your commitment to truth and to facts. And you bring a lot of facts into light that were perhaps not known. For example, I just been reading your column and a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, you wrote about an incident that happened not so far from here, not by Clinton in America. We are sitting here in Brussels and just in the neighboring state in Holland. You wrote about the story of Mahmet Sahin. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name correctly.
Correctly.
Do you mind telling the viewers what was the story?
We are speaking about a Turkish PhD student who interviewed some young people from his own community. Just it happened in one of the cities of Holland, and they told him that they admire Adolf Hitler, and they think that all Jews should be killed.
Did they give any reason why?
Because they don't like Jews. Nothing to do with Israel, nothing to do with the Middle East, nothing to do with, they don't like Jews. And he asks them a lot of questions. I have to drink, just a minute. And he himself, as a Muslim, as a Turkish, he was amazed. And he decided that he must begin with a process of education, because they didn't understand even what they are saying. They hate Jews. They want to kill all the Jews. And he wanted to begin with the process of education, because he himself, as a decent human being, was amazed. And unfortunately, he received a lot of threats on his life, on his family life. And he had to run away from his neighborhood, from his city, and to be in a shelter for many days. It is very sad. I mean, it just, the story is showing us that we are facing a real problem here in Europe. People are brainwashed. Why people had Jews? Why people had Muslims? Why people had Gypsies? People hate other groups because of a process of demonization, of brainwashing. And unfortunately, here in Europe, in the very democratic liberal society, brainwashing is working. A lot of people hate other groups because of brainwashing.
I even noticed there that one of the interviewees, because your article links to a YouTube where it's all documented, gives a reason. He says that the Jews should be killed because they are killing millions of Palestinians.
Yeah, it's very interesting because what you're telling me, I gave a lecture in Berkeley, and a group of students came to demonstrate against me, against my lecture, against the invitation. And I went to speak with them because I really wanted to understand why they hate so much. And I asked them, you are claiming that Israel committing a genocide against the Palestinians. Can you tell me, please, what are you talking about? I mean, how many Palestinians were killed by Israel? And they told me, we think something like 6 million.
Even the
I was amazed.
Even the Palestinians don't claim that there are 6
I
million.
mean, it was a kind. I mean, they remember the number 6 million, which is very known because of the Holocaust. So they are totally confused. They have no idea what they're speaking about. Just to put things in proportion, it's part of my academic work, my research, to put things in proportion. Since the foundation of Israel up to now, we are speaking about more than, at least, but more than 12 million people that were killed in the Muslim and Arab world. Most of them by Muslim and Arabs. Unfortunately, they killed themselves. Unfortunately.
12 million.
12 million
That's a
people.
very big number.
Yeah, yeah. My articles, my research were published. It can be seen in the internet. Genocide that the Arab and Muslims are committing against themselves. And during all the history of Israel, something like altogether, we are speaking about, and I'm speaking about the 48 Independence War, and later on, altogether we are speaking about something like 13,000 of Palestinians that were killed.
13.
13. I mean, now in all the Israeli control over the disputed territories, West Bank and Gaza, they are the territories that are under debate. We are speaking about less than 9,000 people that were killed. Just to put things
From
in
12
proportion,
million to 9, and people
To
are
put-
talking about the genocide.
just yes, to put things in proportion, there is not any conflict with such a low number of fatalities. In any case, I mean, just look what's happening in Syria now. Just look what happened to the Palestinians in Jordan. How many were killed? Arabs against Arabs, Arabs against Palestinians, much more. Just to give the proportion, in car accidents, more people are killed than in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. People just don't understand it, but they speak about a genocide. How can they speak about genocide? I mean, the life expectancy of Palestinians is one of the highest in the Arab world. Infant mortality among Palestinians is one of the lowest in the Arab world. But people ignore the facts. You know why they ignore the facts? Because we are facing an industry of lies.
I actually wanted to ask you about the industry of lies, but I'm a born Israeli, but I'm dividing my time today between Israel and London. And in the last month, we've witnessed some violence, unprecedented violence, not in its scale, but its uniqueness. We had a beheading in London just the other week, the stabbing in Paris, the riots in Sweden. And when I saw your report about Sahin Mahmet, I don't know, to me it made sense. And I actually think that the PhD student in Holland, he actually said that hatred leads to hatred. What do you think about the connection of this blind hatred that is sometimes directed toward locals, the Dutch, the British, the French, the Swedish, and the hatred of the Jews and the demonization of the Jews?
I think many Europeans are living in denial. They are living in denial because they don't see the reality that is emerging here in Europe, in Brussels, in Malmö, in Stockholm, in London, in Bradford, in many other places. And the same way they don't see the realities that are happening just in the Muslim and Arab world. Let me tell you something. People ignore it, but every month, I'm not speaking about Syria, I'm speaking generally, just by global jihad, by terror of the global jihad, we are speaking about between 500 and 600 people that are killed, massacred. A month.
A month.
In Nigeria, in Somalia, in Dagestan, in Iraq, in Pakistan, people are killed. Now, it's Islamists who kill Muslims. They don't kill Europeans, they don't kill Israelis, they don't kill Americans, they kill their own people. They are totally ignored. Who cares about them? Now, Look what is happening in Europe. It's very interesting. It's again, it's not the Muslims. Most Muslims in Europe and in other places are decent people, working people. We are speaking about groups of radicals that are taking over their own neighborhoods and their own communities. I'm not speaking about Muslims, I'm speaking about Islamists. And they are in a process of radicalizing the other people, the communities themselves. And this is the outcome, what happened in Holland. And the PhD student, Mehmet Sahin, he saw the process and he understood that it must be stopped. Now, why did it happen? It happened because of a lot of reasons, but people are connected only to Al Jazeera. They don't even watch the European channels. They watch only Al Jazeera with all the brainwashing against Jews, with all the brainwashings about what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, which is mainly lies.
And this is part of what you call the industry of lies.
It's a huge industry of lies, but it's not only against Israel. We have to understand it. I mean, when people in Sweden, and when people in Brussels, when people in London are against Europe itself, it has nothing to do with the Middle East conflict. It is because they import imams to many mosques and they brainwash the young generation. We have to face it. You cannot ignore it anymore. There was something very, very interesting that happened in Norway. A very nice kind of story. Most mosques are financed by the Gulf countries. In Norway, according to the law, if you want to accept a donation from a foreign country, you have to receive the confirmation of the government. Saudi Arabia wanted to donate money in order to build 2 big mosques in Norway. Now, it's a left-wing government in Norway. They said, we welcome the donation, but we have one condition. And I was shocked because it's very interesting. They said, you want to build a mosque and to give money? We are a very rich country. We don't really need your donation, but if you want to donate, welcome. But we have only one condition, a very simple one. And the condition is, we want to donate the same amount of money in order to build 2 churches in Saudi Arabia. Will you accept it?
And this is documented?
You can find it. Yes, of course, it is. Now, it's a wonderful story that, I mean, I told myself, wow, maybe they are beginning to open their eyes. Not because Muslims are inferior, the opposite. Because we should treat Muslims equally. If you have your own standards, we want it to be mutual. If you don't let us donate money in order to build churches in Saudi Arabia, how comes that you come to our country and ask to donate money? I mean, why do you think that you are allowed to do everything and we are not allowed?
So, your industry, the concept of industry of life, by the way, is this your concept or is a concept you've adopted?
No,
it's strongly associated with you, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that I invented the term, the industry of lies, because that's what it is. I mean,
so can you explain what is the industry of lie and give some examples?
People, yeah, I mean, for example, the story of the refugees. Right now, there is a problem of the Palestinian refugees. I mean, they exist. I mean, I cannot deny that they do not exist, and many of them even suffer. They suffer, by the way, not in Israel, not under the occupation. They suffer, for example, in Lebanon. They suffer in Syria. They suffer in other places. But what people don't know is that, well, it's very nice to speak about the Palestinian refugees, but we are speaking about more than 42 million people that became refugees because of population exchange. They don't know that a bigger number of Jews were forced out from Arab and Muslim countries because of the same conflict. They don't know about so many massacres against Jews in Arab countries. They don't know about the expulsion, about the exodus. They don't know anything. When you single out the story of the Palestinians, it looks like, wow, a crime against humanity. Not at all. Not at all. this is, unfortunately, it happened in the 40s to so many millions. India, Pakistan, ethnic Germans, Poland, Ukraine, and so on. It is all published in my research. Now, the industry of lies is singling out only one story, which is the Palestinian story, and presenting it like the biggest crime of modern history. And you know what? I'm quoting now a very famous professor from the United States, John Mearsheimer. Unbelievably, he wrote this sentence, I'm quoting, biggest crime. I just asked him.
What did
I
he have
sent
to
him
say?
an email. Wait, dear Mr. Professor Mearsheimer, can you please explain me according to what parameters did you define it as one of the biggest crimes? Comparing to what? To Chechnya? Comparing to what? Comparing to Darfur? Comparing to Rwanda? Comparing to what? Can you please answer me? I mean, comparing to what happened to the Jews in Arab countries? How can you define it? Like, I have news for you. Many professors don't like to be challenged with facts. He just did not answer me.
So the industry of lie that you're talking about, and we have viewers now watching us from Channel 7 in Finland, from Alpha Omega in Romania, from Revelation TV in the UK. This is something that effectively affects our lives here in Europe all the time. Europe is investing efforts with trying to resolve the problem in the Middle East, but if we don't really get the right information, we can't make the right decisions, can we?
Yes, part of the problem is that many parties are involved in the Middle East conflict. Everybody wants to solve the problem, but nobody really knows the realities of the conflict. You mentioned the EU. The EU taxpayers are giving a lot of money, and you know who they give money to? It's just unbelievable.
Please share with us.
To NGOs that are supporting the right of return, which means, as they say it, not as I say it, the destruction of Israel.
So the EU
You Europeans, I'm talking to you now. You are Europeans. You are the taxpayers to the EU. Do you know what they do with your money? Do you know that with your money, textbooks are full of hatred against Jews and against the very existence of the State of Israel? Do you know that with your money, you taxpayers, NGOs that are supporting the destruction of Israel are receiving money on behalf of human rights? Unbelievable. I'm asking the official representatives of the EU many times, why do you give them some money? You know that they are striving to the destruction of Israel. How come that you donate the money? They said, no, we give money only to human rights projects. Yes, but the people and the NGO officially is supporting the right of return or the destruction of Israel. So how come that you give them money? I don't receive good answers. Now, what is the problem and how it is connected to the problem here in Europe? So many people, goodwill people, want to appease the radicals. When you appease the radical, you only promote them, you only encourage them, you only create more radicals, and that's what they are doing. It is happening here. It is happening in the Middle East. We always want to appease. You know what? Enough. We know what happened in the appeasement of the 30s. We know that we have a new, sorry to say it, not in a nice way, we are speaking about the monster. The monster is not killing Jews and not Europeans. The monster right now is killing Muslims. Every day, every week, every month. Enough.
And
Enough.
The violence is actually spreading now to the streets of
From
Europe.
time to time, it's coming also to the street of Europe because the same people that are demonstrating against Israel in the street of London are the peoples, the same people who are beheading British soldiers. And they do the same in Paris, and they do the same in other cities.
So how can we fight it?
To face reality. I mean, I think there are many decent Muslims, moderate Muslims, working people Muslims. You should encourage them. You should support them. They are against the Islamization. They are against the radicalization. So why do you help the radicals? Why do you help NGOs that are supporting right of return or the destruction of Israel just because they have good English and they are pretending to be human rights activists? It's just unbelievable, this kind of living in a denial.
Mr. Yemini, we're drawing to the end of this show, and you spoke about the dangers of the growing radicalization of some populations, Muslim populations in Europe, combined with the industry of lie that kind of covers it all up. What do you think can we do, us as a Jewish community, and how can we cooperate better with our allies, the Christian communities around us, and other allies in Europe to fight this phenomena?
There is something very funny. People don't know, and people think that the Hamas, for example, and other radical organizations are against Jews. A big mistake, a huge mistake. I mean, people like to delude themselves. The Hamas and other radical organizations are not against Jews. They are also, of course, against Jews, but they are against Christians, they are against whoever is not them. And you know what? They are even against Muslims who are not them. Because as we already said, it's the Islamists who kill Muslims, mainly. Now, we have to open our eyes and to see the reality. The problem is not Israel, the problem is not the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The problem is with the radical Islam, with the global jihad, that you have it already here. And it's not against Jews, it's against you, Europeans. Not the Muslims are against you. The Islamists are against you. The Islamists are against the Muslims. And you finance them. And you import imams from this kind of dark regimes.
I just want to say that as an activist who acts for Israel, I also have, I lived next to Muslim neighbors back in Israel, and I have Muslim friends, and we're not talking about Islam, we're talking about Islamist fundamentalists.
Oh, exactly.
Mr. Benjamini, in one of your recent columns, you've written that it seems like the Palestinian leadership is more concerned about the annihilation of Israel as the Jewish state than with the establishment of a Palestinian state.
Yes, unfortunately, this is the situation because they could have a Palestinian state. We cannot forget history. We cannot forget that a Palestinian viable state was proposed to the Palestinians. If we go to history, it happened in 1937 by a special commission. They could have a state. It happened again, of course, in the UN 1947 partition resolution, 2 states. An Arab state, which we call today a Palestinian state, and a Jewish state. They rejected it, the Palestinians and all the Arab countries. And it goes on and on. It was proposed by the President of the United States, Bill Clinton. 2 states for 2 peoples. It was rejected by the Palestinians. In that time, by the leader of the Palestinians, Yasser Arafat. It was rejected again, 2008, by Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas.
Do you think, I know that you're not the greatest admirer of Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, but do you think today that if a serious Palestinian leader would have done what the Egyptian leader, Anwar Sadat, and come to the Knesset and just declare there no more war, no more bloodshed, let's sit down and speak peace. Do you think that the Israeli government would do peace with the Palestinians today?
I can tell you just one thing. First of all, I do hope that it will happen. Unfortunately, I don't see something of that kind is happening according to what they teach in their textbooks, according to the money that they give, by the way, on the expense of the European taxpayers, the money that they give for hatred, the money that they give to the families of suicide bombers. I don't see it happening, but you know what? History full of surprises. And the moment that Palestinians, the leadership, will decide to go for the 2 states, for 2 peoples solution, a real solution, end of the month, I can tell you just one thing, that 100,000 of Israelis will go out to the streets and ask for peace. To remind you, it happened before.
It happened. I remember
Israel is a democracy.
Yeah.
And hundreds of thousands.
I'm not that old. I remember the parties, the peace parties of 1993.
Most Israelis are part of the peace parties, which mean, yes, we want our independence. Yes, we want Israel to be a Jewish and democratic state. But it doesn't mean that we want to continue the Israeli control over the disputed territories forever. If they want independence, they will receive it. They will receive it. Unfortunately, I don't see it happening. And if it will happen, and if I will have to criticize the Prime Minister of Israel, I will do it. I have news for you. I do it now.
Yeah, you do. You
do.
do.
So, I mean, I don't have to wait to the future to see that the moment, some months ago, the moment that Abu Mazen said that he himself might give up his right of return to Safad, I immediately published an article. Let's go for it. It's a turning point. The only one problem was that it took him something like 12 hours before he retracted and said, no, I didn't mean it. I was misunderstood.
Yeah. You just mentioned the right of return and Mahmoud Abbas, and we need to remember that the Palestinian political system is effectively divided into two, the PA, the PLO, which is the more considered secular and moderate, and the Hamas, which is considered to be more religious and extremist.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned the right of return. What is the right of return?
Right of return, it means that people...
I should say is the so-called right of return.
The so-called, the so-called right of return. But we cannot forget, first of all, the background in order to understand what does it mean. Background is that many millions, as I said before, more than 42 million people were forced out of their homelands. And the question is, do they have the right to return to their homelands, the places where they were forced out from? And the question should be raised to a lot of cases, to what happened in Central Europe, between Poland and Ukraine and ethnic Germans and so on, so many cases. Now, let's do something which is very simple. If all the others, 42 million people from that time, if they will receive the right of return, in that moment, Europe will collapse. You know what? Europeans know it. That's why only warmongers are asking for the right of return from Germany to Poland or to the Sudetenland, I mean, Czech Republic. Now, so I don't want Israel to be singled out. I don't want the Palestinians to be singled out. I don't think that so many Jews that were forced out from Arab countries should receive the right of return to Yemen or to Iraq or to Egypt. You know what? I have news for you. We don't even want the right of return. We don't want the right of return. And you know what? The Palestinians deserve a statehood. They want self-determination. Let's go for it. But you cannot ask for the right of return to another state, which means Israel. Because if you ask for the right of return to Israel and not to Palestine, you do not mean peace.
So effectively, the right of return is a cover-up. It's
a cover-up, yeah. It's a synonym to the destruction of Israel. Let's put it on the table. It's a synonym. I mean, most decent people know it. Most people, decent people, but they support this kind of NGOs that support. I mean, this is the main question here in Europe when we are sitting here in Brussels. The main question is how comes that the EU is supporting NGOs that support the destruction of Israel? I mean, it's a question why they abuse the money of the taxpayers from Europe in order to promote radicalization and hatred and destruction. You know what? I cannot understand it.
On a similar note, we said that the Palestinian political landscape is divided into PLO and Hamas. I found either explicit or implicit support to Hamas. Now, only a few years back, I actually took the Hamas covenant and read it cover to cover. And I was shocked to find that the Hamas has an article that
Article
7,
paragraph 17. Yes,
7,
7.
that enshrines genocide
Yeah.
in the Hamas covenant, and talks about the annihilation of the Jewish people off the face of the earth. So basically they're saying it has nothing to do with the conflict in the Middle East, has nothing to do with prisoners, it has nothing to do with settlements, has nothing to do with war or occupation. They are saying that Jews are inherently evil and the world cannot be a better place before they are exterminated. And they go on saying, not in their covenant, but in their speeches, that Hamas is taking upon himself the responsibility of finishing off the job of what was started by the Nazis. When I was reading this, I was truly shocked. But one of the questions I get a lot is, isn't it just rhetoric, or do they really mean it? What do you think?
We have the answer. Unfortunately, we have the answer because we have to look what is happening in the Arab world, in the Muslim world. When they kill each other, they massacre each other. If you want the answer, just look at what is happening nowadays, every day, a massacre after massacre, day after day in Syria. Look what is happening. Now, think that it was not Muslims against Muslims, that it was Muslims.
You're referring, for example, to the 80,000 fatalities in the Syrian civil war?
Just in the last 2 years. I mean, so if you ask a question, you cannot ignore the reality. And the reality, they fought each other, Iraq and Iran. They did it in Algeria in the 90s. To remind you, there was civil war.
70,000.
Nothing to do with Israel. It's something between 100,000 and 200,000. Now, imagine that the same kind of people will have the chance to kill Christians or Jews that they consider as enemies. Will they do it or not? Unfortunately, we know the answer because we see what Islamists are doing to Muslims, what Shiites are doing to Sunnis, what Muslims are doing to Copts in Egypt. I mean, we see the reality. We cannot ignore the reality. Now, the reality has something to do with Europe. I mean, we are speaking about the Jews like if the conflict is a kind of a political one. No, it's not a political conflict. It is something which is much deeper. What happened in London is to bring the Syrian school of mind or the Iraqi school of mind or the Pakistani school of mind to the streets of London and to the street of Paris and to the street of Stockholm. It is happening, which is what we see is a kind of beginning. So stop it.
Actually, you're touching on a very interesting question, and that's the chicken and egg or interface between Europe and the Middle East. The Middle East is changing, Europe is changing. Do you think that Europe is today taking positive steps in trying to entangle the mess we have in the Middle East and the war, or do you think they're actually making things harder?
They are making things harder, unfortunately, because they live in a kind of denial. I mean, we don't have to watch that here in Brussels and in Malmo and in London. There are parts, there are neighborhoods in every city which are a free zone. I mean, nobody can enter even, not even the police. I mean, leave the Middle East. Go to Europe. I mean, why are you focusing in the Middle East when here in Europe you have much bigger problems? I mean, you are living in denial. By the way, Muslims, again, are the victims because they are the victims of their own people. I mean, you
So
look
you're
at,
saying
I mean, the most prospering community of Muslims is under the Israeli Jewish state. Just an example. I mean, people don't even imagine the differences between Israel and what's happening here in Europe, in Brussels, in Stockholm, in London. Just some years ago, the Israeli president was sentenced to 7 years in jail. I mean, it's known, unfortunately, 7 years in jail. He had 3 judges. The presiding judge of the Israeli president of the Jewish state, the presiding judge was an Arab citizen of Israel, George Kara, his name. Now, in Israel, Arabs have the best kind of life, even comparing to Europe. In Israel, they are prospering. In Israel, just 2 months ago, the winner of The Voice, which is, to those who don't know, The Voice is the most popular reality program.
It's a singing,
the winner
singing show.
Is Lina Mahul. She's an Arab citizen of Israel. People just
also
don't
there
understand,
was
but they are speaking, you know what they're speaking about? They're speaking about the apartheid state Israel. They have no idea what is Israel. Yeah. They have no idea that Arabs can be my doctors, my lawyers, my judges. They don't understand the realities of Israel, and they speak about Israel. I wish Europe will treat the Muslims here as Israel is treating the Arabs in Israel. I wish, I pray, come to Israel in order to learn the lesson. I'm not saying that there is not any kind of discrimination. I'm not saying that we should not improve ourselves. I'm not saying that we are perfect, but one thing I'm sure about, we are much better than the Europeans. But the Europeans ignore it. You know why? Because the industry of lies is prevailing.
Actually, you said your doctor is Arab. I actually use this when I'm attacked verbally, not physically, by people saying that Israel is an apartheid state. I just tell them that last time I've been to Israel, I got a scratch in my eye and I went to hospital to be treated. By the way, a religious Jewish Orthodox hospital, Shaare Tzedek in Jerusalem, and I was treated by an Arab doctor. But I want to go back to what you were saying about the Muslims, the human rights organization, who are ignoring the real human rights victims in favor of not fictitious, but maybe not the main problem. I had the privilege to be involved with an activity with Amnesty International. Amnesty International invited the organization called MEMO, Middle East Online Monitor, and they invited them to speak in Amnesty International premises. What they didn't know, that MEMO was a signatory of support on Hamas's covenant. So Amnesty International, an organization that is dedicated for promoting human rights, invited an organization that signed for international genocide, that signs for women, oppression of women, of religious intolerance. And this is the funny situation that we are seeing here. When you make a lot of arguments about the Palestinian right of return and about discrimination, one may think that you're trying to claim that 2 wrongs make a right.
No, I'm not. What I'm asking for is something which is very simple. Let us all adopt the same kind of standards. You know, I was challenged by a student after I gave a lecture in Berkeley. And he told me, it's very nice, whatever you presented to us with your comparisons about how many people were killed here, were killed there. And yes, we really see that Israel is not really killing Palestinians as it was argued. But, you know, we hold you for higher standards. So how can you compare? I told him, look, next to you, I see someone with a veil. What's your name, please? I asked, and she told me her name was Fatma. And I told him, look, I don't know where is Fatma coming from, maybe from Syria, maybe from Saudi Arabia, maybe from Pakistan. I have no idea. But when you are telling me that you hold me for higher standards, you know what you are telling her and some other Muslims that are in the audience? You tell them that you hold them for lower standards. You know what does it mean? It means racism. You know what? Enough. Enough. This kind of double standards is becoming more and more dangerous. By the way, when I compare Israel to other countries. I compare Israel not only to Muslim countries, I compare Israel, speaking about violations of human rights or death toll or fatalities. I compare Israel also to the United States and to NATO. And you know what's the outcome? Israel is keeping human lives more than NATO, more than the American army. Here are the facts. Here are the facts.
When I'm seeing the reports about Israel and about the conflict here in Europe or where I live in London, what I get most striking that most of the criticism is about how the conflict is being managed rather than why there is a conflict. And when I go to people and I just show them clips of Hamas leaders saying that the conflict is not political, but it's effectively a conflict in which they aim to perform genocide and just kill me, my wife, and my kids. I mean, that's what they say, right? They look at the camera and they say,
it's much more than that, by the way. If you don't know what they say, the leaders of the religious leaders of the Hamas, what they're saying is that we should conquer, it's in their own voice, we should conquer Rome and London. Say to your friends, the useful idiots, I would call them, tell them enough to delude yourself that they are speaking about a political conflict with Israel. They are speaking about London. And the radicals who are stabbing the British soldiers, they are not speaking about Israel. They have no idea where is Israel on the map. And the radicals in Nigeria, they don't speak about Israel. They speak about the West and the Western culture and the universal culture. So when I say that they hate us, they don't hate us because of what we do. They hate us because of what we are. Because we are Democrats, because we are liberals, because we want freedom of speech, because we support women's rights, not because we oppress Muslims. They oppress Muslims. They kill Muslims. They oppress women. But we have to put it on the table. Enough with this kind of self-delusion, self-deception. What do you think that if you will say that the problem is in the Middle East or in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it will solve your problem here? It will solve the problem in Nigeria, it will solve the problem in Somalia, it will solve the problem in Iraq or in Syria? Nothing to do with it. 99.99% of the problems of the Arab world have nothing to do with Israel or with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
So you come with a unique voice where you try and focus on the why rather than the how. You talk about human rights organizations and you criticize them, not on how they cover it, but why they cover it. You prove in your reports. And by the way, I should tell everybody the reports are almost all of them translated into English, and you can find it online.
And also some other languages.
So you say you prove that those organizations are motivated by being anti-Israeli. You prove that the conflict is because of the lack of willingness of the Palestinians to accept a Jewish state. I'm really fascinated. You have the opportunity to present your findings to people of influence. How is it received?
Some of them are influenced. I have a surprise for you. It's not that I paid a visit to some places, like Ireland, like other places. I met journalists and politicians. And I must admit, I found a lot of open-minded people. And they said, you know what? Many things we just didn't know. We really didn't know.
So how can we...
And I want people to know, I don't want people to be against Palestinians. Of course, I don't want anybody to be against Muslims. I just want people to know the reality. I want people to support the moderate Muslims. I want people to support the moderate Palestinians. I don't want anybody to support the radical NGOs that disguise themselves like if they are working on behalf of human rights. That's what I want. I don't think that the way to solve the problem is to support the NGOs that are supporting the destruction of Israel, and tomorrow they will decide that they want the destruction of Europe, and they don't understand it.
I have a funny story for you. I was participating in a demonstration in Covent Garden in London, and there was a Palestinian there. And we actually managed to get to some agreement between us until the BDS people came in the picture and just broke it off. They couldn't see that we actually come to an agreement between us. It was quite funny.
Yeah.
But I have to try and sum up this program.
I have to say something about the BDS. BDS is the biggest deception of the free liberal democratic countries nowadays, because they are attracting. They speak wonderful English and they present themselves as human rights activists. The BDS is not against the occupation. The BDS is not in favor of peace. The BDS, in their own voices, of their own leaders, is supporting the destruction of Israel. Listen to their voices. Do me a favor. I beg you. Just listen to what they say. Don't listen to me. They strive for the destruction of Israel. They are the Hamas people, but with a good English. That's what they are. They are the Al-Qaeda people with a very nice English. That's all.
I'll have to try and bring it to a conclusion. We heard very informative information, very powerful things about a growing radicalization of society here, about seemingly human rights organizations that are effectively being anti-Israeli, disseminating anti-Israeli lies. We can learn more, we can do more. Mr. Yamini's blogs are translated into English. You can Google them. I recommend it wholeheartedly that we would do so. I want to remark on your last comment about BDS being Hamas just in different colors. When I was active in Covent Garden, I challenged the BDS people to condemn Hamas. I would go with the Hamas covenant and just show the passerbys that Hamas covenant, just black on white, says, calls for genocide, and ask the BDS members, can you please condemn Hamas? And because most of them, in private conversation, were either members of Hamas or supporters of Hamas. So I really recommend every viewer we have now to do that. We are on a crossroad in Europe. It can become better or it can become worse. And I think we should try and make it better, and with the information that you're providing to us, we can make it better. Just one last question. If there is one activity that our viewers can do in order to support, what would you recommend it would be? Writing to their MPs?
Everyone, I mean, a lot of people have a lot of power. Many times we, as viewers, as readers, I mean, we think we are powerless. I mean, we are manipulated by this kind of mass media and so on. No, no. If each one of you will ask his representative, I don't want you in the EU to finance radical NGOs. I don't want you to finance textbooks that are striving for hatred. Do the most simple thing that you can do. Learn the facts. By the way, don't take me for granted. Check the facts. Check the facts and go for it, for your own sake, for reconciliation, in order to promote liberal democratic Muslims and in order to promote peace.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benyamini. We will have to close up with those words. We have to follow the money. Ask your MPs where your money going. Make sure it doesn't go to radical groups. Be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I'd like to thank Mr. Yamini for your fascinating interview. I'd recommend everybody to read Mr. Yamini's blogs, and I'd like to thank our host on the European Israel Press Association again, and thank our viewers from Channel 7 of Romania, of Alpha Omega, Channel 7 of Finland, Channel Alpha Omega of Romania, and of Revelation TV of the UK. Thank you very much for staying with us, and please stay tuned for more episodes of the European Report. Thank you, and shalom.